Hello and welcome to the Coaching Chapters podcast, the space where ideas turn into actions and dreams become reality. I'm your host, Beenish Mirza, and in each episode I will sit down with some really wonderful, incredible women who've taken a spark of inspiration and transformed into something so meaningful. These are real stories of purpose, passion, and perseverance. So wherever you're listening from, settle in and get ready to be inspired. Welcome to the second episode of the Coaching Chapters podcast. This episode is going to be really special, joined by a Dubai-based author, and she's going to be telling us all about her amazing book. So I'm joined by Sara Hamdan, a writer, editor, and now debut author of the novel What Will People Think? A story that weaves together identity, culture, and the courage it takes to truly be yourself. Sara has worn many hats, from being a New York Times journalist to working in tech and banking, and now storytelling across the Middle East. And this book is a beautiful blend of her experiences and heritage. It's set in New York and in the 1940s Palestine. It explores the power of voice, family, expectations, and how the stories of women across generations live within us. In this conversation, we talked to Sara about her journey as a writer, the themes behind her book, and what it really means to step into your truth and your own purpose, and especially when the world is watching. So let's get started.
Hi Sara, so lovely to meet you, and thank you so much for letting me share your story with everybody. It would be lovely if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about your background, where you're based.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to meet you. I feel like a kindred spirit. There's so much about your own experiences that I feel like I'll learn from, and I can't wait to just have this chat with you. I've been a Dubai resident for 20 years. And I've lived all over the world. I grew up in Greece. I'm an American citizen. I went to grad school and college in the US. So I'm a bit of a third culture kid, which is why living in Dubai really feels like home for me. Everyone you meet has a 10-minute answer to where are you from. I think this is the main question that kind of guided me when I was writing my novel. What will people think? That came out May 20th and is part of the reason why we're meeting today. I've worked all of these corporate roles my whole life. I was a journalist for the New York Times for 6 years. I worked for Google for 6 years. I was the managing editor of an internet research and development company based out of California, but I was living in Dubai, so working US hours, if you can imagine that, for a couple of years. And I finally feel like I'm coming home to myself because I can call myself an author now. I've been wanting to say that since I was like 6 years old. I've always wanted to be a storyteller. There are just a lot of hurdles along the way, some of them internal, some of them just life and the things that life throws at you that kept me from it. But I feel like I'm so excited to sit here and talk to you as Sara, the author now. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And I love that, Sarah, the author. That's so nice. And you spoke a bit about, where you grew up, where you've spent a bit of time. How much of those different cultures, those experiences, how much of them have they sort of facilitated you becoming the author, Sarah?
So much. I mean, I think all art is personal in some way, like you draw from your life. And I feel like it's such a privilege that I had a chance to live in these different countries and then to travel to surrounding places from those countries. I didn't even realize it was weird or different until I met people who'd grown up in one place their whole life. And I had all these random stories and experiences. I've always been a bookworm, so I think reading books in English was a constant everywhere. But there were even little things like when I was younger, I'd realized that I was pronouncing words incorrectly because I had only ever read them. So I would say them wrong. So just little things like that. Part of it is one of the things I learned was that I can kind of shapeshift, so I can get along with anybody. Like you stick me in a room with a couch, I'll become the best friend of the couch. And I think that's what helped me become a good journalist. So I can I'm really interested in meeting different people. Everyone's got a great story. I can get along with anybody. I'm a good listener. But then the other side of that is that you always feel like you're a bit of a misfit. So there isn't anyone who's exactly like you because of all of these different places that I've lived and the different experiences that I've had. So I think that sense of fitting in everywhere and nowhere is also part of what drove the themes in my book about maybe cultural identity, stereotyping, trying to feel a sense of belonging and acceptance. So, all of these themes that I think anybody who's moved from one city to another, or even within their family, if they're a little bit different. So, if your whole family is doctors and lawyers, but you're the artist, and you feel like that sense that you're trying to figure yourself out and why you think or feel differently from those around you. I think that's where the book will resonate with you most. Um, and for me, I think I drew on my own Palestinian heritage. I'm Palestinian American, but I've never been to Palestine. And in this book, I got a chance to do a lot of research because I wrote scenes that take place in Jaffa in 1947. A lot of the simple village life that's portrayed in the book is based on my own grandmother's childhood memories. So it's just this exercise in digging deep and exploring who I am and my background and my heritage. And I feel like maybe it's a bit midlife crisis-y, but you do this particular work to understand who you are a little bit. And I think my future novels will have pieces of different places I've been. So I might want to set something in Greece. My second book, because it's a two-book deal that I have with my US publisher, which is wonderful. But the second book is actually going to take place partially in Dubai. So half of it will be in the US and half in Dubai. So I do want to express myself in the places I've lived in my work, but I'm still figuring out where and what.
Nice, nice. And I really love that because actually what I'm hearing through that is skills and experience of adaptability and deep listening. And that layered piece around belonging, what does it mean for you and how you navigated exploring that? So thank you so much for sharing that actually. And I guess stemming on from that, you said you've had multiple different careers, different roles. Do you mind telling us a bit more about how you navigated that career shift and change, what your experiences were, and actually bringing that need of belonging? It sounds like you've done quite a bit, so we'd love to hear more about that.
I grew up in Greece and then I went to college in the US. And I feel like that was my first experience with culture shock because I'd lived in Greece for so long and I had my set of friends and, that simple European way of life. And then college in the US was very different, very driven. Everyone was there to achieve. And just meeting the different people and realizing that even though I am an American citizen, I am different to them. I think that's where the first seeds of realizing that there was something different there were planted. So in my novel, she's 25 and it is that coming of age. And I think I drew on those experiences a lot of feeling like you fit in, but you don't. And I went to university in California the year after 9/11 happened. And there was a strong I'll call it anti-Arab sentiment that was very difficult to navigate. And I think part of it was that. So feeling like you needed to hide certain parts of yourself or you needed to um, be extra nice in order to feel accepted. That first year of college when I was away from my comfort zone and my family and suddenly being in the States where people are regarded when they first meet you, those feelings also came into the novel of sitting around the table and being asked questions like, oh, you're originally Palestinian. My neighbor is Pakistani. I love curry. What about, these kind of things that you get? Or, oh, okay, Palestinian background. Yeah, what do you think about what's going on in Iran in the headlines? Like suddenly you become this spokesperson for the Middle East. So these small tense moments I wanted to bring to life in this novel in a kind of humorous way, which is why I made her a stand-up comedian, because then she takes that material and she turns her pain into something funny on stage. So it was a way of just processing all of that. Um, and I think when I first went there, my mind was just very focused on my studies. I really wanted to be an author, but I didn't know if that was a smart thing to do or a good way to make money and earn. And like every good immigrant, even though I'm an American, um, you're supposed to be a banker, a doctor, or a lawyer. So I went with banker. And I did well enough in school to get a great internship at Merrill Lynch. And then I moved to London for that internship. And then I got the job. So again, that feeling of kind of earning your way to belonging. So I was getting my acceptance through professional success. And I think that theme continued for a little while. So then I moved to Dubai for a job with Merrill Lynch because I'm an Arabic speaker. And I came here in 2005 when it was all desert, like before the Atlantis, before Mall of the Emirates and Burj Khalifa. There was Sara Hamdan. And it was just amazing to be here when the city was young and still figuring itself out, just like me. And I feel like I grew up with the city. So I came here young, single, 20 something, wrong job, slowly found my way into journalism. I remember when I was at Merrill, once a month, I think, or once a week, we would have to stay in the office until 2 or 3 in the morning to answer client calls in case somebody wants to place an order on a foreign stock market. So it's this rotation that you have to do. So it was my turn, and it was just me in the office alone, and phone wasn't ringing. I'm just bored. And I start flipping through a magazine. It was a local business magazine. And it said inside, if you have a story that you think might fit our publication, please send an email to the editor. So I just wrote a story about an IPO that we'd been, I learned about through the work that I was doing and submitted it. And they called me in the next morning for an interview, and they said, come and work for us. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a writer. This is amazing. I went in, got the job. It was like a third of the salary. But finally, that was the transition. It was like the validation that I was looking for, to know that there was a way to make money as a writer. And that's how I began my journalism career. So it started here. And then one thing led to another. I moved to the national newspaper and then to graduate school in New York because I wanted to make sure that I was a good journalist internationally, not just in a small market. And then the New York Times for 6 years, and then Google for 6 years. Throughout all of this, I was writing on the side, and I never let go of that idea that I wanted to be a novelist, but I think I was still figuring out my voice. There was some inner doubt. It's very different to listen to people and hear fascinating stories and then share those stories versus something created in my mind. So there was those seeds of doubt. Is this interesting? Is anyone going to care about a novel that features Palestinian women? Is this mainstream enough? Am I wasting my time? Should I be focusing on work and my kids, etc., etc.? But I think just plugging away and giving up of that idea that it had to be published right away and do great right away. I gave myself that grace, I think, in a way. So when I would get these rejections from agents and all that, I still had my job and my kids, and so since that was working okay, it didn't hit me hard enough to stop, if that makes sense. So I just kept writing, and then got a Netflix award for a scene from the novel, and then a spot
Amazing.
fellowship, got an agent, got the book deal, and now here we are.
Because actually, through your storytelling, you've touched upon your corporate experiences, that drive to just give it a go. You talked a bit about motherhood. You mentioned that you had your family as well. Through that, it sounds like there was this persistency, this perseverance in your storytelling, even if it was a smaller piece. Do you mind telling us a bit more about the sort of habits you created to navigate parenthood, working, but then keeping your passion flowing as well?
It's funny because I always say this novel took me 10 years to write because I started when I was pregnant with my son, who was literally turning 10 in a couple of weeks. And I think there's something very special about pregnancy. It's got a creative force of its own. You're building a baby, and then it just makes you think about your time and how you spend it very intentionally. So before that, I was just very driven with work. I gave it my all, and um, it's what we were talking about earlier, maybe before you hit record, about that linear progression. So I know how to, study and get the A, or do really well at work and get the bonus. But suddenly being pregnant made me think about my time. And I wanted to create something of my own because when you're climbing this corporate ladder, there's only so far you can go. And I think it gets harder and harder as you get to the top, and it becomes more and more demanding of your time. And I would just look at the highest kind of the C-suite, and I would think to myself, is that where I want to be? And I started to second guess myself. So I started to write because it just made me really happy. It was almost meditative. I would get in this state of flow. It was so relaxing. It didn't feel like work. It didn't feel like I needed to It's not like the gym where you have to do it and you just make yourself put on the workout clothes and it's good for you and then you feel good after. It's not like that. I look forward to it all day. The things that I want to write are in my mind and I can't wait. Like I'm itching to get to the computer to just get it all down. And that feeling has been there from day one. So when I was pregnant and I was, 9 to 6 in an office working for a magazine, I was an editor at the time. There are just blocks of time when you finished all your work and finished your meetings and you're just waiting until it's time to go home. And I would start to write. And I think there was a lot of stopping and starting because then I had my second child and maternity leave, and then the pandemic hit. And I think one of the hardest phases for me, I'm sure many can relate, is during the pandemic, I had two children under the age of 5. My husband and I were homeschooling. And that age when they just really need you a lot. I remember I remember tweeting once that I had a half an hour where I was writing something or editing something, and my child asked me for a snack 18 times. It was just a very difficult period. How am I supposed to be creative and enter a state of flow at that phase? It's
Yeah.
so hard. But there were a couple of things that helped. One is I have an amazingly supportive husband who would tell me, you have a talent in this. Why are you not dedicating time to this? Tell him, oh, I have to go do this for the kids or I have to do that. And he would tell me, go upstairs, block off your calendar for half an hour and just write and see where it goes. And I think he gave me these little boosts to just go and do this thing that I loved. And this is such a loving gesture, because it did lead to where I am now. So piece by piece, these little half an hour at a time. After the pandemic ended, it became easier because very disciplined with my work. And, as a mom of two, you have that activity calendar and everything. I'm good with that. But with my creative work, I would let that slide and it was almost like treating it like an afterthought. And that stopped when I got the Netflix award because I thought, okay, this is something that I really need to pay attention to because if I give this my energy in the same way that I do to loving and raising my kids, to the effort that I put into my work, maybe this can lead to something. So I started to be a lot more structured with my creative work. So I'd take my kids to school in the morning, go to the gym, have my coffee, and then write for half an hour before the workday started. And I did that for a couple of years. And it's amazing what 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day can do. And it's not even every day, but just that consistency and that coming back to it. It's like exercise or it's like eating healthy. It's just these small little daily habits that you look at the end of a year and you're like, oh my gosh, like I wrote a whole draft of something and this is a physical, tangible thing. Like I printed it out and I held it and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like having a little baby. Like I did that. So that was a huge sense of accomplishment because it was just for me. And again, it doesn't give returns right away in the sense that that first manuscript that I wrote wasn't even this book that we're talking about today. What will people think? It was another manuscript. It got rejected a whole bunch of times, like I think about 30 agent rejections. No one was taking it on. And that lesson for me was, you can really love something, but maybe you don't get the external, like they don't meet you there. This was a complete other story that I had written. And that's when I started writing the other book, which became What Will People Think? And it was almost like the first one was my training ground to learn for myself how long it takes to write a novel. How do you structure the different parts? Um, just digging into storytelling technique. When does the big incident need to happen? How many characters do you actually need? How do you create a more authentic romantic feeling between your two leads? All of these different things. I was like working out the kinks so that when I got to the second manuscript, I had my routine, I had the idea, and I had the honed storytelling skills. And that's why I think it worked.
Yeah, that's so nice. You're really sharing not just the accountability that your husband to you with, what habits you created for yourself to get into that flow, just giving yourself 20, 30 minutes. How many times did we just put on a TV show or just faff around on our phone? But actually 20 minutes was like your magic powerhouse time where the words were just flowing through your pen. And I really appreciate you sharing the part around how many rejections you had, the 30 rejections, the training ground. Because from that, you can actually see where your passion is leading to something, is leading to carving your path for success. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so tell us a bit more about the book then, about Mia, the main character, and where did the idea for the book come from?
So at the beginning, the story has a dual timeline. So Mia is a 25-year-old. She performs stand-up comedy in secret in Manhattan, and by day she's kind of very buttoned up and works at a respectable media company in New York. But by evening, she's kind of herself and she lets loose on stage. And part of it is that model minority myth. So just working really hard and doing your very best, because if you don't, there are bigger consequences than for other people. You'll always have to kind of aim. If everyone is here, you have to aim over here when you're in the States. This is the feeling that I felt. And then the second storyline is she discovers her grandmother's diary that dates back to Jaffa in 1947. And at its core, this is basically a story of a Palestinian family that was forcibly displaced at that time. But it shows it through the eyes of a young 16-year-old she has a crush on this British soldier who's new to the town. He's different, and she's kind of seeing this alternative life that she never imagined, compared to the one that was prescribed for her. And her parents expect her to marry this very wealthy landowner who's 30 years older than her. And so there's this illicit love affair that happens, and the diary scenes go back and forth between Mia's modern day scenes, and it's just kind of a coming of age story for both of them to accept themselves and their flaws, but also recognize the right to love who you want to love. And sometimes who you want to love is not right for you, but it ends up leading you to the right person that's meant for you. So it's a tale of loss and love that I think a lot of people can relate to, just through the eyes of these Palestinian women, which we haven't seen in contemporary fiction before. And I think this is why it resonated. Um, I wrote a story that I really wanted to read myself. There's a lot of Arab fiction that I think is very heavy and laced with sorrow, and that's understandable because, especially when it comes to anything with Palestine, it's just been so difficult. And I've been hearing these stories from my grandmother's time and my mother's time and now mine. And so I just wanted my contribution to be something that was maybe a little hopeful and joyful, so that my children might see something that they think feels a little bit happier, because we're never granted that with any grace. It's always been something that's very heavy. And we see that now. There's a huge humanitarian crisis, and it's ongoing as we speak. And it's unfortunately nothing new, So how can I write a story that feels warm and loving and that anyone can connect with? And you realize that this isn't really a Palestine story. It's an every human story.
Mm.
And that's what the story is about.
Yeah, thank you. And I do think the narrative is changing. I do think the space for stories like yourself in art and literature, and just having those more cultural understanding of modern day stories is, there is a space for that. But how important was it for you to create that space, and how did you go and try and create that space for yourself, for voices like yourself, modern day Sara, living in the UAE, American Palestinian? Do you mind sharing a little bit more about how important it is for you and how you went about creating those spaces?
Yeah, I think at the beginning I was very scared to do it because I wasn't sure how it would be received. I wasn't sure how honest I could be about the feelings and the vulnerabilities. But I think that's where the best writing comes from. You have to figure out where it hurts and then put your finger on that a little bit more. And then you realize that that's where people will meet you because they're feeling that way too. And the first manuscript that I mentioned that I wrote had nothing to do with Palestine. It was more about the AI world and a woman who lives in London, and she's addicted to the tech world, and then she has to go to a Greek island where there's no tech, and she falls in love with an innkeeper. And then you realize that the reason why she's the reason why she's addicted to the tech world is because she couldn't let go of the AI version of her husband who had passed away. So it was more of like a meditation on grief, and it had that Greek element. So nothing to do with Palestine. But I think the feelings are so authentic in what will people think in terms of this trying to fit in, showing who you are sometimes, but not. How the world has a narrative to do with Palestine, especially, I mean, again, I started writing this 10 years ago, right? So it's very different to the conversations that might be happening today that are more aware or open or whatever you want to call it. Like, there are more stories out there. There are incredible authors like Isabella Hamad and Itaf Room, who very kindly gave me a blurb. There are TV shows that have become huge hits, like Mo on Netflix. Uh, Even Coldplay posted on Instagram about Mo. Coldplay had Eliana, a Palestinian Chilean singer, open for them. So you are seeing more pop culture references, I think, than ever before. But when I started writing this 10 years ago, there was definitely that feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, is anyone going to meet me halfway here and connect with this material? Am I just writing this for me? Is this like a Dear Diary thing, or does this have any appeal? Will this have readers? But then I took that question out of my mind and I just started writing something that really came from the heart. And I think there's an undeniability there. When you are so vulnerable and open, I think people appreciate it. It's real. The feelings in there are real. And I think everybody, like I was saying before, everyone in their life, no matter where you come from, you felt like a misfit at one point. If you're a young woman who's wanted love or looked for love, you will recognize those sentiments. So there are some very universal themes. And I think that's what I was trying to hit, and it worked.
Yeah, nice. And that courage, that curiosity for provoking courage and being a bit more vulnerable, sounds like, it's paid off for you now. It's paying off for you now as you carve that journey. But how much of Mia and the characters within the book reflect yourself and your own stories?
I love this question, and I've gotten it before because people will read the book and think, oh, this was actually her. But it is fiction. I mean, there is a license to play. Like I said before, I think I was a journalist for so long telling other people's stories. I did want to include some bits of me in this, but this isn't my story. I'm not a stand-up comedian by any measure. There are some elements that I'll tell you about. So one of them is the comedy link. The reason why I made Mia a stand-up comedian is one is because I wanted to share a humorous Palestinian story, which we never see. So there was that fresh angle. And how do you write about a city like New York that you see in every book and in every movie in a new way, in a way that feels unique? So seeing it through the eyes of an Arab American was the way to do that for me. But the real reason is because I met my husband by interviewing him for my very first story for the New York Times that was about the rise of stand-up comedy in the Middle East. He was a TED speaker. He's got over 1 million views on his TED Talk that's about the way that comedy can change culture and change opinions. And at the time, he was the head of original content for a broadcast TV station here that was credited with putting stand-up comedy on TV. And he's just part of that world. So I interviewed a bunch of comedians for my story, and everyone told me, you have to meet this guy named Jamil. He's perfect for your piece. Um, and I was trying to get through to him, and finally we met in a bookstore, of course, where all love stories are housed. And we were just friends for a couple of years before it turned romantic, and then we got married a year later. But comedy's had this really lovely thread throughout my life because of him and because of the way that we met. I used to be really terrible at public speaking. I was very, very shy because, again, my strength was in giving other people the stage and giving them my full attention. This is why I was a good journalist. But for me to then get up on stage and speak, I don't need to do that. I didn't feel like it was for me. But I kept missing these amazing opportunities because as a stringer for the New York Times here, I would get asked to moderate a lot of events, and I would always just turn it down and say, no, I have no desire to get up and sit on a stage. And my husband would say to me, no, you need to put yourself out there because this is how you level up. And he was right. So I went from very clammy hands, absolutely sweating under my arms, absolutely terrified of public speaking. He put me through a stand-up comedy course so that I would learn how to not just get up in front of people, but tell stories and be funny. And at the end of the 6-week course that we did together, I now moderate all the time, and I love sharing my stories, and I love, getting on panels and all of that. So that comedy element does have a similarity to my life, but I'm not a comedian, and after that course, I never did it again. It's not for me. Um, and then the stories that my grandmother told me about her childhood in a village near Jaffa. So just, the time plants and where the mosque was and where the school was, and hearing these simple details from her, there was just something that excited me. The olive trees around her, all of that. So I used those elements, and then I did a lot of research to understand what life was like at that time. So there are elements there, but of course my grandmother did not have an affair with a British soldier. I think this is it's in the end of the day.
Yeah, really nice. So some really important characters, people in your family that have helped inspire you, encourage you, and really support you through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so lucky with that.
And could you tell us a bit about all the different awards and all the different mentorship programs you've been through that have supported you? Dubai, I know, is a really fantastic place to support all forms of creatives in particular.
Yeah, living in Dubai, I think, was just a stroke of luck, because when you're good at what you do, it's that big fish, small pond feeling of you really can rise up and shine. So I had incredible work opportunities, but then with this writing, um, at the time when I had 2 manuscripts that I'd written and they had nowhere to go, suddenly I attend this press conference, and the Emirates Literature Foundation announces a fellowship for writers who have written complete manuscripts who want to make it on the global stage. And I'm like, okay, universe. Like, you just delivered something exactly. It was just one of those moments of synchronicity when it just felt like the universe was telling me, Sarah, you're onto something, keep going. And I remember it was Halloween, and I was sitting there thinking, wow, this can't be. And then I applied to this fellowship, won a spot. I was one of 10 fellows. It was the inaugural year, so the very first time they do this. And suddenly I had a tribe. I had other fellows who were going through the exact same things as me. The agent rejections. Is this draft good enough? Can you read my opening sentence? Suddenly I had community. Writing wasn't a solo act anymore. And although I am a writer, I'm not an introvert. I'm the biggest extroverted writer you'll ever meet, because again, I'm fascinated by people. I think they have great stories. I love to mingle and to chat. And so having this tribe, suddenly it felt like that missing puzzle piece that I'd been waiting for. And we would workshop our pieces together. And some of my best friends to this day are from the fellowship. So I came out of it with very solid friendships. The fellowship itself is a year long. It's free. They offer a golden visa to any recipient, which means that you can have the luxury of living here without having to get a visa through work or even through your partner. So it's kind of like that first validation that you are a writer. Your talent is worthy of this great thing. And then we got monthly workshops with different famous authors, storytelling techniques, everything from character development to setting to, all of this nerdy stuff that writers get very, very excited by. Um, and then we're all flown out to either London or New York. In my case, it was New York for a 2-day workshop, and you get to have dinners where you meet agents and editors. So suddenly you feel like you're part of this club, like you're at the big boys table, where before you're always outside looking through the glass, and suddenly you're invited to this seat at the table because of this fellowship. And on top of that, you get a dedicated mentor who's a famous author who will read through the manuscript with you. So in my case, the mentor who chose me was Ursa Sigurdardóttir, who is an Icelandic crime thriller, million best-selling copy author. And at first, when she chose me, it was such a pleasant surprise, because my novel is humorous women's fiction, and she's famous for these like dark murder mysteries. I'm like, why, why did she want to work with me? But then it turned out to be the biggest blessing because murder mysteries in particular, you need to know how to build suspense, and you need to be very, very careful with your structure, like where you plant clues for things. And so she worked with me on um, 4 or 5 different drafts, and we structured it. And by the end of the fellowship, my manuscript was so polished. It was so, so good, like technically undeniable in the sense that I just needed an agent who would connect with it, which is more subjective. It's like a great song. Either you like it or you don't, but it's technically sound. So I had reached that point. And then, thanks to her, thanks to the fellowship, all the work that was put into it over the years, I went from being somebody who had over 30 rejections on my first manuscript to a second manuscript with 5 or 6 agents who were trying to woo me to represent. And I'm like, wow, okay, we're on to something. I even get goosebumps thinking about it now. So that was a big shift. And then some of the agents were introduced to us through the fellowship. So the Emirates Literature Foundation has relationships with agents in the UK and the US. And this is so crucial because without somebody in this role to champion your work, it's really hard to get that traditional publishing deal, which is the aim. And so some of the agents came through the fellowship, and some of the agents were just external ones that I had always admired and wanted to pitch to. And out of all of the agents who were interested in representing me, I chose 2. One of them is Meredith Miller in New York. She's with United Talent Agency. And the reason I chose her is because there was an instant connection. She's this powerhouse negotiator. She's got a very good editorial eye, but she's also based in New York, which is the big market. I wanted somebody there on the ground who's going to go to those editor lunches and all that. She just ticked all the boxes for me, but then on a personal level, she works like how I do. She's really good with answering emails, and a deadline is a deadline. Like there's a certain way to work, and we have a similar one. And she partnered with Sheila Crowley at Curtis Brown in London, which is the second big market. And the 2 of them worked together on securing the book deal, but then also working with me editorially on the drafts, giving guidance, like brainstorming ideas for future projects. So the agent is really key. So the fellowship was just instrumental in helping me get to that stage. And then the agents are the ones who took it forward. And I can tell you about the book deal experience, which was all very new and exciting.
Yeah. And this is why I really loved learning about the author and not just diving into people's books, because actually your story is calling out from, the lovely bookshop where you met your husband to your fellowship and talking about your community that you've got, that mentoring opportunity, even the chemistry between you and Meredith, and why actually from a ways of working perspective, it was so important. There's so many wonderful it sounds like your life is a bit of a movie, but it sounds like there's so many real lessons in that as well. Actually, the power of a community, the power of mentorship, and having that support system, someone you can really work with, who understands your style, your communication, your vision and goal of what you're trying to achieve. What advice would you have for listeners that are potentially writers or creatives wanting to pursue something, but not knowing how to navigate that community, that mentoring relationship?
Yeah, it's so tricky. And I mean, you're a great listener because you're picking up on all of these things that are so important. And it took me so long to learn. I wish that I'd learned it sooner, but I think everything happens in its time. Um, for a long time working in these corporate roles, I felt like I was chasing the wrong things almost, like the secure paycheck, which is important. We are a 2 income household, and we want to provide a good life for our children. But at the end of the day, I was so deeply unhappy because I wasn't aligned with what I really wanted to do. And it just felt like every day getting up for this sense of duty rather than what am I on earth to do? Life is so precious. And I think hitting the age of 40 and working for these big, impressive brands and then feeling a little hollow inside made me rethink a lot of my choices and pay attention to who I surround myself with and how I spend my time. So getting this tribe around me of writers and the right mentor, I felt myself coming alive in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. Motherhood is so wonderful, and all the career choices I've made have been around my children. So even when I was working as an editor at Google, I was on a fractional arrangement because I wanted to end at 1 and come home and be with my kids in the afternoon. So I was doing a full-time workload in part-time hours because I wanted to be present for my children, which also meant I was doing the full-time mom thing. So it was exhausting. I was just tired all the time. And you just feel like you're giving out so much of yourself to everyone and everything. And I just reached that point where I thought, well, what about me? I need to take care of me to take care of everything else. And I think that's where investing time and love and energy into relationships was a game changer for me the past couple of years. So the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, I've made the best friends I've ever had, even more so than when I was younger. I still talk to my high school friends. I still talk to my college friends. I'm in touch with colleagues that I've had throughout my different jobs. But I have soul sisters now, and I think having that female friendship energy, and they understand you so deeply. They're going through the same motherhood issues. They're also trying to manage their household, their marriages, their work. There's something really sacred in this. And I think my advice would be to find a couple of really strong friends, real proper friends, not just the ones you lunch with occasionally or you see when you're bored, but the ones who you have those moving conversations with and you can laugh for hours and you don't notice the time. I think this is just one of my personal biggest life lessons for writing and for otherwise. And the next thing would be to just prioritize yourself sometimes. I think women don't hear this enough. We're so used to outsourcing ourselves. And you need to make yourself a priority sometimes, and that's okay. And it's not selfish. It makes me a better mother. It makes me a better writer. It makes me a better wife. And it's not just about getting the occasional massage or doing your nails. It's doing something that is fundamental. And in my case, it's writing. Um, I also do things that are just random and for fun and don't lead to anything. It's not about taking care of my children or doing well and succeeding in work or writing or whatever. I started playing drums last year. I take drums classes every other week.
Nice.
It's an outlet and dashing the stress away, but also learning an instrument and being bad at it, and that's okay, has been a wonderful stress relief. And again, meeting people who like music. I'm a music lover. So this is another, I'd say, it falls under the umbrella of prioritize yourself / self-care and just go for it. Whatever you wanted to do. Life is beautiful and short, and you have to come out of it with something that you really, really love doing. So just go for it.
Finding your tribe, your girl tribe, or just your friendship tribe, really. And that I like the bit around not always having to be productive, do something that doesn't need an output. You don't need to be good at it, but actually just do it for yourself. And that last piece around, look after yourself, because actually, if you look after yourself, you'll be a better mother, a better partner, a better human in general. And you can really see that through your energy. You can just see you're bursting with creativity, yet you have a really beautiful sense of calm in the way you speak and the way you portray yourself as well, Sarah. So thank you. And so coming back to your book then, what is like one thing you really want people to take away, or a couple of things you want people to take away from reading and exploring your book?
I would love people to just connect with it on some level. So I think when people read a book, it's also about their perspective and what they're going through in life. So I've put something out there, and then they're going through things, and it's just about that meeting halfway. And this is funny, but it's also an emotional read. And there are some scenes that I'm really proud of. There's a beautiful wedding scene in Central Park in the snow towards the end with an older couple who gets married, and it's very moving and unexpected. And I want people to walk away feeling moved. And from the Goodreads reviews that I've seen that have come in, a lot of people are very excited to read contemporary Arab fiction that they haven't really seen before. But then there are a lot of people who say things like, this was so eye-opening, I had no idea about this culture or the wedding rituals or the foods. So um, there's just more awareness about how people are different, but how they're similar. It's about our shared sense of humanity at the end of the day. And I'm hoping to create a career out of being an author, not be a one-hit wonder. I think one of the feelings I'm having these days is this book is my debut. It's the very first time I am an author. So a lot of this is new for me. And it's already made the New York Times recommended reading list and Forbes and Yahoo and Goodreads, and it's just getting all this critical acclaim. It was the National Public Radio in the US Book of the Day. So this is huge. It's huge for an established author. It's huge for a debut. And so part of it for me is like, oh my gosh, can I do this again? So there is that feeling. But I think now that I'm finally allowing myself to accept, you know what, I'm good at this. I can do this. And maybe I can do more of this. I want people to be excited about what comes next.
That's so exciting. Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to read your book. I think the balance between it being an emotional read, yet having that comical edge to it sounds so innovative, actually, quite new, quite different. And obviously the layer of that the Palestinian themes, I think, is very current. People are very curious. I'm very curious. I know members of my book club will be very, very curious to also read your book. So thank you. And so Sarah, what's next for you? What's coming up for you? You mentioned more books in the pipeline. Can you tell us a little bit more?
It's funny because earlier you mentioned about rest and not being productive, and I'm still trying to learn how to do that well because I'm so used to, jumping over a hurdle and then getting to the next one. So I made myself do nothing for a couple of weeks and it was hard, but I enjoyed it. More drums classes and all that. Um, it is a 2-book deal, and it took me 10 years to go from ideation to publication of the first one, and now I have 10 months to do it again for the second book. So there is that pressure to get a draft done. I have until the end of the year, so I'm working actively on finishing that book. But it's summer holidays coming up for my children, which means I have to take 2 months where I'm not working. I can already see she's coming up. Good. She's won't. She's got a fever and she's not at school. So, I learn on these things. Um, so I need to work on the second book and just see what comes next. Like I said, it's my first time being an author, so I'm I'm learning about things like foreign and translation rights. What would it look like if there was a film deal and talks of that? So there's a lot of new space I haven't operated in before, and it's exciting and it's scary. And I also can't wait to see what happens next. So stay tuned. For now, I know that I need to deliver book 2 by the end of the year, and I can't share too much about it yet, except that part of it will take place in Dubai.
Very exciting. I think we need more books based in Dubai. It's what everyone craves, wanting to know stories in Dubai. So thank you for giving that little bit of a snippet into what the future is. So thank you so much. If you could just tell us a little bit more about where in the UK, in Dubai, in the UAE, when we can anticipate getting your book more available and where it will be available globally.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this support. It really means a lot. I mean, like I said, it's my first time going through all this. So these conversations are so meaningful for me. So thank you to you for being such a good listener and asking such great questions and just making this a lovely morning. For now, the book is mainly available in North America, so Canada and the US on Amazon.com. But anyone from anywhere in the world can order from there. It just might take slightly longer for delivery. In the UAE, you can find it at Magrudy's and on Amazon.ae. And in the UK, I think you can order from Amazon.com for now, but there will be a UK deal to come shortly, and it should be available in every bookstore soon. So just stay tuned. I've also seen there's a bookstore chain called Blackwell's in the UK. I think they stock a couple of them.
Okay.
Stay tuned. And for now, I think Amazon.com is the best bet.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much once again, Sarah. It's been so lovely. You are such a warm person to listen to. You speak so eloquently, and actually, just hearing your story, I know a number of people listening will really be able to resonate with some of your own journey. Maybe not as a writer, but as a woman, as a mother, as a corporate. Thank you so much for sharing that, and good luck with the rest of your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the
Thank you so much for tuning into the Coaching Chapters podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired and reminded you of what's possible when you follow your own calling, your own passion. If you loved this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a review. And remember, every big journey starts with a small idea, a small passion, and a small calling for purpose.